Let's turn on now to the Android Basics segment. And today we're talking about the autofill. We're going to keep it short and sweet because we know you guys like that autofill. First, though, we want to talk about what is autofill. Then we'll talk about who needs it, why, and how does it come in handy, most especially after you do a reset and all of that. Let's begin by talking about autofill. John, you want to kind of get us started on what autofill feature is?
Sure. So it's basically a way to, you can use Google's by default, or it might be Samsung Pass by default on a Samsung phone, but you have the ability to change it to whatever provider you want. So if you use LastPass or another third-party password manager, you can use it. And what it'll do is when you go to a website or you're signing into an app, it will allow you to, fill in your password and your username automatically, or you'll get a prompt to, as soon as you put the edit field in focus, it'll usually pop up and ask you, would you like to autofill this? And you can fill it. And it also works on websites if you're filling in information. So if you want to save like your contact information, like your address, or you want to save your credit cards, you can save that stuff too. So if you're on a web page where there's a bunch of fields that need to be filled out, as soon as you put one of those fields in focus, it'll ask you if you want to fill all these fields in automatically, which can be a huge help and save a lot of time.
Thank you so much, John. And here's what we're talking about. I just picked up my phone.
Autofill service heading.
I need to turn up that volume a little bit, don't I?
Google. Autofill service not selected. Edge in list.
So I am
Accessibility volume
in my
settings.
autofill area now. Let me start that again. So I am in the autofill area, and if you install any of the apps that has autofill services, whether it's Microsoft Edge or whether it's Firefox or whatever, Dashlane, LastPass, 1Password, the list goes on and on. They will show up in this area after you tap on the autofill service. The default, mine, like I indicated last week, mine is Google.
Not selected. None in list.
So here, the first thing says none and
Selected. Google.
Google.
Not selected. Authenticator. Not selected. Dashlane. Not selected. Edge. Not selected. Edge. Not selected. Firefox. Not selected. Tor browser. Add service.
And the last one is add service. And the reason why you heard it say Edge twice is because I got two versions of the Microsoft Edge. I got the regular Edge and the Canary version of the Microsoft browsers. And that's why you heard that. And so if you install any of the browsers that has autofill capabilities, it will show up in this list. And so you choose the one that you prefer, or you could add a new one. And every time you install any of the password managers, it will show up in this list. As long as you give it permission, it'll be among these items that I just showed here. So that's how you go about choosing which one it is that you prefer. And like John says, the reason why we like this autofill is because it simplifies things. For example, you don't have to type things in the edit fields and things like that. Once you put in the first thing in there, the whole thing gets populated and comes in very handy when you're filling out long forms that needs things like your first name, last name, address, apartments, if you have one, and things like that. So autofill comes to the rescue. Now let's talk about why would one need an autofill? Why do we need an autofill? Guys, would anyone find one reason why it is important that we need one?
Autofill makes it very easy, because if someone resets the phone, and imagine you have like 60-70 websites or apps that you have to type in your username, password, it'll take so much time. So autofill makes it easy to do that.
Exactly, because it also that's your password because they work hand in hand. It's a password manager, and you could have 300 passwords or whatever or more. And I think one of the reasons or one of the things that people complain about sometimes with the Android side of things is the fact that, oh, a lot of my apps didn't come back or things like that. I have to type in my username and my password again. And people complain about that. And the reason is you use the password manager and use an autofill service, then you can bank on it that every single time that you have that new phone or you reset that phone, those things are going to be there. The most important thing is that you make sure that backup is turned on in that Google, that automatically these things get backed up. Now, then the one thing that Google does, which I hope they would improve on, Google only allows for up to 25 MB for each app data to be stored. And that's why when certain things are not brought back when you reset your device or you go to a new device, and even though the apps are there, but some of the features are not there until you start using it, is because the backup is only like 25 MB, and that's the problem. So with that in mind, then we know that whenever you're trying to use your autofill service, make sure you have that backup turned on in Google. And this way your stuff is going to be backed up and you're going to be ready to go, and you wouldn't be needing to, do things manually.
I think one of the most crucial things as well when it comes to autofill, especially like with Google, is the fact that whenever you have syncing enabled and you're signing into a website through your desktop, your computer, personal laptop, or anything like that, you can actually use autofill to also sign into those apps once you sign in with your Google account. I think that's such a neat feature as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I also wanted to point out, if you are using Google as your autofill service, it makes it even easier, because as soon as you set up your phone, you just can start signing into your apps. But if you are using a third-party password manager, the first thing you're going to want to do before you sign into anything is go to that app and sign in. So if it's LastPass, sign into the LastPass app, and then make sure you go into the settings and set that as your default, so that when you do sign into everything else, it'll be a much smoother experience. And I also wanted to point out, I mentioned this last week, but if you are using a Samsung phone, these settings for autofill and passwords are not in the accounts section like they are on Pixels. They're actually further down in the settings in an area called General Management. So you're going to want to look in General Management, and then you'll find passwords and autofill in there. And that's where you can set your default password manager and autofill manager.
I also have to add, in terms of Samsung phones as well, whenever you go to that area where you want to look at your autofill settings from that general management settings and autofill, as John mentioned, you'd need, if you have a fingerprint setup, you'd need to enter that for you to get into this area. Or if you don't, it would ask you to actually enter your Samsung account password. So make sure to have that.
There's something that John mentioned, which is very important. If you're using a third-party autofill service, say Dashlane, for example, that I have. Now, what happens is that if you reset your device, for example, and you come back, you will need to remember that master password for that service, or else you're not going to be able to use it. So that's the difference between this and what Google services are, because it's with Google, it's already part of your stuff, and so you don't have to do that. Everything is there. So that's one thing to remember. So if you're using a third-party autofill service like Dashlane, LastPass, or whatever, make sure you remember that master password, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to use it. You'll have to choose something else. And the other thing that I think I like about the Google Autofill service, the one we talked about last week, and it's worth mentioning here again, is that ease of exporting. Say you want to export your stuff to something else, and I find that Dashlane was the easiest. If you say, hey, I want to export from Google, it makes it easy to export your passwords from Google to the Dashlane password manager. And I've tried a lot of them very complicated, and I like simplicity. So if you're thinking of one, give that Dashlane a look if you don't want the one from Google.
Something else I need to add is that some people, like before, were complaining that autofill from this magic word G, O-O-G-L-E, is not working. So to get over that, or to figure it out, you need to go to accounts and then other privacy settings, and then you'd have something called Google Autofill, as you can see here. And you need to turn that switch on for it to work properly whenever you are on a browser or anything like that. Also, something else I need to add is, if we go back, because it kind of differs from another phone to the other. So when it comes to Samsung's autofill settings. Okay, so if you go to general management and then autofill, and then we go to autofill with Samsung Pass. Autofill with Samsung Pass. We have settings. Samsung Pass. As I said, scan your fingerprint. Scan your fingerprint to verify your identity. It asked me to scan my fingerprint, and I did. Samsung Pass. Samsung Pass. So the thing that I really like here is that we have more options. Sign in info button. Use biometrics for quick, secure access to apps and services. Apps websites. Manually added. 0. Apps websites. 4. We have all the websites that use autofill that are because Samsung Pass and autofill asks you to enable autofill if you want to. So you have all the apps that are assigned in here. Manually added. 0. And manually added, if you go in here, you can actually assign certain apps or websites yourself. Private info button. Safely stored credit cards. Address cards. 0. Addresses. 0. Cards. 0. Addresses. 0. Notes, 0. Button space. So it basically splits everything into little sections, which I think makes it way more organized when it comes to autofill. I'm not sure about Google's though, but I think Samsung does definitely a great job when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think they're both pretty similar.
Yeah, Google does the
set
same
up the
thing.
same way.
Yeah, because that's where we saw last week when you go to passwords, and there you could see all the apps with the passwords, or you could choose to add a new one manually if you wanted to. So basically, they do the very same identical thing, and it's a good thing because you can go in here and manage those things if something has changed, or if you need to delete something, or totally get rid of a password for an app. It's a good place to go to manage those.
I love that you can just do your fingerprint. It's so much easier than having to remember a load of different passwords.
Yeah, but you have to have this set up in the settings. If you don't, it'll ask for your password. That's but I just.
Oh yeah, but if you turn it on.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty similar.
A lot quicker.
And it's pretty similar to iOS, because I remember I used to love this on iOS, and when we got it on Android, I was really happy with that. So obviously, really good.
Yeah. So what happens is that when you are setting up an app or you're logging into an app, I'm using my bank app for example. Now, some of them support biometric and some don't. And so if let's say I'm using my Wells Fargo bank, and when I'm trying to log in, it will offer me if I want it to. And if I opt in, then I can use my fingerprint. The same thing for PayPal and a lot of services. And so it depends on the app. It's not based on what the autofill service does. The app has to support that. If the app does not support it, you can use it.
My bank app's interesting. It usually lets you do a fingerprint, but occasionally it'll make you type in the code. But usually you can use your fingerprint to be quicker. But I mean, it's for the bank one that I've got, it's a 5-digit code that you have to have. But yeah, usually you don't have to. So that's quite cool.
Yeah, so see, for me, the only time that I would need to put in my PIN would be if for some reason my fingerprint is not working and I've tried it a few times, then it will revert to asking for my PIN, and that will be the PIN for my phone, that is
Oh
when I
no, this is
start
a
my phone.
different one
Yeah.
for my bank. It's a different number. And it'll say, for extra security, please enter your 5-digit code. And I think it tells you you'll be able to use your fingerprint next time or something. It's probably
Interesting.
some financial services
At least they're
law
not
that they
making you
have to
put
do
in
that
your full
occasionally.
password every time. At least they let you set up a PIN.
No, they most of the time I don't have to, but just very occasionally.
Yeah.
And it isn't the same as the phones.
Yeah, some would let you do that. I mean, like my Discover card, if I wanted, I could use a PIN instead. So I could either use my fingerprint or I could use a PIN. The same thing is true with PayPal. If you want, you could use a PIN and you could, authenticate yourself that way. So different companies, implement it differently. And so that's why I was saying that, it all depends on the app and the company. Some companies may support these fingerprint things or face unlock things, and some don't. So it all depends on which app it is and what service one is trying to use. So I haven't talked about this. I think that we have already talked about the advantages that I thought we'll be talking about last, and we've already talked about those, and that's especially when one resets their phone or you get a new phone and you're transferring your stuff to your new phone. It does come in very handy. So if you guys have any last words about this, then you could say that before we move to our next segment.
Can I just ask, if you don't use your fingerprint for autofill, do you type in your PIN instead?
Yes, then you must put in your PIN.
Yeah. But at least it's still only one thing to remember instead of all these different passwords and actually your usernames as well for different websites. Because I've got 2 or 3 email addresses, and sometimes I forget which one did I sign up with for this service.
Exactly. And
So it's
that's
quite
what I like
handy.
about autofill, because when you tap that edit field, it will show you which email you have for that area.
If you've got more than one account, for example, I've got more than one Twitter account, it'll let you choose which one you want as well if you've got more than one. That's quite handy.
Exactly. As soon as you tap on that edit field, it will show you all the accounts that have the autofill services. Like say I have Walker at Gmail, whatever, and then I have another one, 2 dogs or 2 dogs on a farm or whatever. So it's going to ask which one it is, and I choose the one that has that service, and it'll just populate both the username and the password field, and all I need to do is just tap on login. And so it's a very good, handy tool. I think it's probably one of the best things that I like for using the phone is that autofill service.
Also, something I need to add, last thing I need to add. So basically, whenever you try to sign in into a certain app or or a website, after you sign in and type in all your info, let's say it's a new website or a new app that you signed in for the first time. Samsung Pass, and I think since Android 12 and 13, if I'm not mistaken, it'll ask you if you want to add this to your Samsung autofill history. And you can either say yes or no, or not now. And once you say yes, it's going to ask you to enter either your password or your fingerprint. So I think that's kind of a neat feature. So that way, anytime you won't enter, like you sign into a new website, you don't need to go and add that manually. Of course, you still have this option like we showed earlier, but you also have this option whenever like you sign in, it's going to pop up and ask you what you want to do next.
Yeah, it's really good, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Warren, how come you've got Edge on your phone? I'm just curious because I've got Chrome. I've got Samsung Internet because it came on the phone, and I've got Chrome. I don't really need Edge on the phone. Does it do something exciting that I don't know about?
Well, so I like trying different browsers, and
Oh,
frankly, I
okay. So
used to
it's
have
it's
so
a bit
many.
of geeky geekery.
Yeah, I kind of
It's a little more edgy.
yes.
Yeah, he's on the edge of geekery.
Especially now that Edge uses the Chromium engine, so it renders pages exactly, for the most part,
Yes.
exactly the same way
Well,
as Chrome would.
this is why I was curious.
But-
Why would you bother with it?
It just depends. Like, if you use, I could see how if you use Edge on your PC a lot and you want all the passwords to sync between both of them,
Yeah, but
then you would use it on your phone as
why
well.
would you use Edge anyway?
Well, so I used to have a lot of browsers, and as you can hear, I still have, those two from Microsoft. I have Firefox,
You've
I have
got two
Tor,
versions of Edge,
and
though,
I
not
have-
just one.
I have
Wow.
I have Brave and all of that, and Tor.
Is there one called Cowardly as well? If you've got Brave.
I got Tor as well. I think I like it.
Maybe we should create one called the Coward.
Yes,
The Coward of the County.
The coward browser will not be able to access internet because it is very coward to go on the net. It can be attacked
Yeah,
with viruses.
right. And it's going to be the least secure browser ever. Like,
Yeah. Just open a page and you'll be attacked.
Exactly.
It'll be the Coward of the County, and
Yeah.
no one is going to touch it. It'll be
And
a
every
no one.
time something goes wrong, it cries.
It's going, no, this website's secure. It's going to cry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And in fact, it closes itself down because it runs away.
It does.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And I do want to mention also that with the Google as well, just like Miriam indicated earlier, if I'm signing into something new, it will ask if I want to save that to my Google autofill. And
Yeah.
I
And you
put
can
the
choose not
yes
to, because
or not. Yeah.
if you let somebody borrow your phone for a few minutes and go on their Facebook or something, they might say, actually, no, I don't want you saving my password on the phone. I mean, personally, I never lend anyone my phone, but some people might be nicer than me. Or more foolish, depending on your point of view.
Yeah, but if your phone has a guest mode, if you're giving someone your phone to use, you put them in guest mode.
I just don't lend anyone my phone.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. That does not happen.
Yeah.
But as I say, there are other people who are kinder than I am.
Yeah.